All right, let's have a look at using Minitab to answer questions about the normal distribution. We have a question here on slide 34 asking us about your relative standing if you wrote the test for English as a second language and you scored at 648. And it's known that the average test score was 540 with a standard deviation of 60. Now, because you scored at 648, you definitely did better than half the people who wrote the test because the average is 540. I guess the question is exactly how much better did you do? Now, as your note shows, if we had to work this out by hand, you'd calculate your Z-score. It turns out to be 1.8. And if I scroll down through here, you'd go into your your standard normal distribution tables, look for a Z-score of 1.80, and as this thing shows, the area to the left will be 0.9641. Which is great, but we're all lazy, and how do we get this answer if we were to use Minitab? So let me open up Minitab here, and bear with me for a minute. I gotta adjust this. Alright, so once we're in Minitab, we're going to go to the Graph tab, and we're going to use something called the probability distribution plot. Now be careful, because there is also something called a probability plot. This plot tells me whether or not my data say meet a normal distribution. This one will show me the area under the curve and answer for me questions involving probabilities and proportions and percentages and that kind of thing. Okay, let's click this. We want to view the probability. Click OK. And you have the choice here of, well, first of all, you have the choice of choosing your distribution. In this course, we're only going to look at the normal, and that's the default. And the default settings is that Minitab will use the standard normal distribution. So I can, in my standard normal distribution, the mean is 0, and the standard deviation is 1. If I wanted to answer this question about the TOEFL scores, I could use these settings, and if I did, I would go into shaded area and I would give Minitab the Z-score. Now Minitab here, it calls it an X value. This can represent X or Y or Z or whatever. In this case, I'm using the standard normal distribution, so any value I give it actually represents the Z. So I could plug in my Z-score here in your notes that was worked out to be 1.8. I want to find the area to the left of that Z-score, click OK, and here's my answer at 0.9641, which is exactly what you would get if you used your table. Okay, but we don't even have to use the standard normal distribution. If I come back in here and I give it the actual mean of this distribution, which is 540, and we're told the standard deviation is 60, come back into shaded area, and this time, rather than giving it the Z-score, I can just give it the X value that I'm interested in. And we were told we have a person who scored 648 on this test. Let's find the area to the left, and there's our answer again at 0.9641. All right, notice up here, I'm told that this is a distribution whose mean is 540 and whose standard deviation is 60, and this 648 is their actual score. In using this method, I am not converting anything to a Z-score. Minitab is doing all of that in the background. What we have to realize is that in order for Minitab to do this calculation, it itself is calculating the Z-score, accessing a database, and finding the area under the curve. This way, of course, is a lot faster. Now, to pursue the use of Minitab a little bit more, here's another question involving these TOEFL exams, and in this case we want to know what percentage or what proportion of people who wrote the test scored between 510 and 600. Going back to Minitab to answer this question, again I would go to the Graph tab, Probability Distribution Plot, view my probability, and I've got my parameters in there already. And we wanted to know what percentage fell between 510 and who? Now I don't even remember what the question was. Oh, there it is. 510 and 600. Just 1 minute there now. 510 and 600. Plug in those values. It's going to give me the area between. I click OK, and what's my answer? 0.5328. So there's a couple ways I can phrase the answer to this question. I can say that the proportion of people who wrote the test and scored between 510 and 600 is the 0.5328, or I could say that 53.28% of all the people who wrote this test scored between 510 and 600. Now, Minitab will also work the reverse way. In this question right here on slide 38, we're being asked what TOEFL score does a student have to have in order to score in the top 10% of everybody who's taken the test. Now, the top 10%, that means we are being given the area under the curve. And because they're in the top, that 10%, as we see right here, is in the extreme right-hand side of the curve. So 10% of the area is to the right, but 90% is to the left. We can get the answer directly from Minitab. Let's go back in here. All right, in just a minute. Okay, so again, going into graph probability distribution plot, view my probability. The average test score was 540 for this population with a standard deviation of 60. Whoops, not 160, 60. And this time we are actually going to give it probability. Now, probability represents area under the curve. What is that area under the curve? It's 10%, or areas have to be expressed as decimals, so it'll be 0.1. And I want an area of 0.1. I can do this two ways. I could go with the area of 0.1, and that 0.1 is the area to the right. So it's in the right tail. I click OK. What's my answer? This person has to score at, if I round up, roughly 617 on this test in order to place in the top 10 percentile of everybody who has written this test. So that's one way I can get my answer. If I go back in and do this again, I can give it the area to the left. Doesn't matter. Now, if I give it the area to the left, which is 0.9, I have to make sure that I specify left tail. So here all the area to the left is 0.9. What is the test score that cuts off that area? It's again approximately 617. So your notes are showing you how to work this out by hand using tables. Minitab, of course, is doing all of this in the background.